This is gonna blow your mind. There are many buildings in the world that are simply totally impressive when you stand in front of them. Top thrill 2, Atomium, Great Wall of China, the Colosseum, and of course the Pyramids of Giza. But first, don't forget to like this video and press the follow button. I've thought for a long time about why I find the pyramids the most mysterious. I explain it to myself like this. With all the buildings I've just listed, you can immediately recognize what they were built for. Except for the pyramids, they're simply giant geometric shapes, enormously large with no windows. I can't think of any other building about which so many stories and myths are told as about the Pyramids of Giza. So what do we really know about the pyramids? First, a brief overview. Pyramids of Giza, wonders of the ancient world, and UNESCO World Heritage Site. The Pyramids of Giza are among the oldest structures in human history. They are located in Egypt near Cairo. They are one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The only one of these 7 wonders of the world that still exists today, and they have been a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 1979. The construction of the pyramids began over 4,500 years ago, and that is already one of the biggest problems in their research. 4,500 years is a long time, just for context. Cleopatra is probably one of the most famous Egyptian rulers. She lived from 69 to 30 BC. The Great Pyramid of Giza was completed around 2580 BC. This means that from the Great Pyramid of Giza to Cleopatra, it is about 2,500 years. From Cleopatra to us, it is just under 2,100 years. This means that Cleopatra is 400 years closer to us than to the construction of the Great Pyramid of Giza. With such an old building, it is no wonder that the most adventurous stories revolve around its construction. Who built the pyramids? To put it bluntly, no, it wasn't aliens who built the pyramids. We don't know exactly how people managed it back then, we only know that they managed it. Very helpful for research are some valuable papyrus pieces that were found during excavations in 2013. These are the only text sources so far that date directly from the time in which the Great Pyramid of Giza was built. In this papyrus, yes, that's the plural of papyrus, there is definitely valuable information about how the work was organized in these monumental buildings. Interesting and quite different from what we know from Asterix. The pyramids were not built by slaves. Egyptologists are much more likely to assume that the workers were well-trained specialists. The papyrus states, among other things, that there were different groups of workers with specific tasks, and that indicates skilled work. Furthermore, there were regular working hours with daily tasks and processes. So there was a structured work organization, and there was pay, including food and special allowances for the workers. And that simply speaks against unpaid slave labor, one of the arguments about how the pyramids were built. The idea that the pyramids were built by aliens suggests that the people of Egypt were technologically incapable, and, that is a clear example of a typical Eurocentric view that does not trust other cultures to accomplish complex achievements. According to this view, well, if we can't do it, how were the ancient Egyptians supposed to have managed it? How the pyramids were built, especially how the tons-heavy boulders were lifted up into the air, that is actually still an unsolved mystery. However, there are some quite plausible attempts at explanation in science. Ramps were most likely an important tool for getting the stone blocks up onto the pyramids. Opinions on the way these ramps were used and their exact function, however, differ. It is assumed, for example, that ramps running perpendicular to the pyramid were used, or ramps that zigzagged to the sides of the pyramids were built. These were tangential ramps or spiral ramps that ran in long paths around the pyramids, or a combination of ramps and lifting devices. These auxiliary structures were probably dismantled after construction, or were made of less durable materials. If, for example, the scaffolding was made of wood, wood unfortunately doesn't withstand the weather for 4,500 years. So there is no archaeological evidence for these specific construction techniques. But that doesn't necessarily mean that these techniques didn't exist. We know, for example, that the lever principle was already known and used back then. Therefore, we can assume that levers were used to lift the stones. What we haven't been able to figure out yet is, for example, how the pyramid apex, the pyramidion, was placed on the pyramid, or how the pyramids were smoothed. Yes, they used to be smooth, like the pyramid at the Louvre in Paris. How were stone blocks transported in ancient Egypt? Another mystery is how the Egyptians were able to bring millions of tons of boulders into the desert. Heder Shisha from the French University of Marseille conducted research on this in 2022. She discovered that the entire area up to just before the pyramids used to be flooded, and perhaps even deliberately flooded. This is the Khufu branch of the Nile, which had a significantly higher water level during the construction of the pyramids than today. This means that building materials could have been transported to the pyramid construction site by cargo ships. This is also supported by another study from 2024, and Gahn from the University of North Carolina Wilmington and her team used two special radar systems, S and GPR. SAA is the abbreviation for synthetic aperture radar. It is deployed from satellites or aircraft. This allows for accurate topographic maps of large areas. And GPR, which stands for ground penetrating radar, is a ground penetrating radar. It allows the subsoil to be examined without having to dig up and destroy everything. From the data from these radar surveys, Gaim and her team reconstructed the course of a now vanished branch of the Nile. This branch of the Aramat River flowed more or less very close to the pyramids. Aramat, by the way, is Arabic for pyramid. They were therefore much closer to the water than they appear today and than previously thought. Water is a superb transport medium. It makes it much easier to transport really heavy boulders to the pyramid construction sites. But even with water, construction was an incredibly impressive feat. One thing is new discoveries in the pyramids, simply stacking a few boulders on top of each other at the pyramids. Added to that is the fact that their interior is at least as mysterious. If you find an entrance somewhere outside, you can crawl in and see where it leads, but it could be that there are rooms in these buildings that no one has discovered yet. Indeed, since 2016, a series of research papers have been published as part of the Scan Pyramid project, and completely new rooms have actually been discovered in the Cheops Pyramid. This is after more than 200 years of modern pyramid research. The team led by French physicist Sébastien Procureur examined one of these rooms more closely. It was a corridor-like structure in the Cheops Pyramid on the north side, and they examined this structure using technology from space. The technology is from here, but the particles they used for this come from space. Muon radiography. Muons are elementary particles similar to electrons, only about 200 times heavier. They originate from space. When cosmic radiation from space hits the Earth's atmosphere, because radiation has such high energy, it penetrates even the thickest rocks. However, they are absorbed more by rock than by air, and this is precisely what the procurer exploited. If an area in the pyramid contains less matter, such as a cavity, then more millions reach the detectors. Images of a newly discovered chamber in the Cheops Pyramid. After the discovery of this cavity, a team led by Christian Gross from the Technical University of Munich was able to further investigate this area using non-destructive testing techniques. In doing so, they were able to determine the precise dimensions of the cavity. This corridor has a square cross-section of approximately 2 by 2 meters. It begins at a depth of 80 centimeters and extends to a depth of about 9 meters. You also have to be lucky when you're researching around, because they found a crack and were able to push a small camera through it. This is what it looked like. However, no researcher has actually been inside this room yet. The fascination of pyramids. Even though it's all really exciting, these incredible stories about the pyramids, the treasures in the burial chambers, the curses, the mummies, the inscriptions, and the fact that the pyramids still interest us after such a long time and we regularly discover new things, one aspect is often overlooked, namely the gaps we have in our knowledge of past cultures, such as ancient Egypt. Sure, the pyramids have been stable for over 4,000 years, but these are essentially just the traces of the wealthy 3 to 5% of the population at the time. Such monuments were of course built to last forever. Unlike everyday objects, almost nothing is known about the lives of the remaining poorer 95% of the population. Research is only just beginning. Even poverty in this context probably needs to be understood quite differently than poverty today. Our view of that time is not only shaped by what grave robbers and the elements have left behind, but also by where we come from and the era in which we live. We will probably never be able to fully grasp the past. On the one hand, it's a shame. On the other hand, that's also one of the reasons why the whole thing is so exciting, especially when you consider what else will be discovered. For a building without windows, not so bad. And here's a little bonus. Another word for enormous and gigantic pyramidal. Thanks.